So you've clicked on this video because you want to create the ultimate cow grinder. You've seen countless other videos, but none of them have seemed to pique your interest. But this one has, and you want to know why? Because I can help you create the best cow farm out there. So make sure to watch the whole video. And if you like the tutorial, make sure to click that subscribe button, like the video, and might as well click the little bell to get notified for whenever I make future videos. So as you can see, we have these two excellent cow farms right in front of us. We have the old traditional cow grinder, which is super cheap, highly efficient, and very easy. And then to the right, we have the cow cooker. A little bit more complicated, a little bit more pricey, especially because of that observer. But if you do it right, you will automatically cook all the beef. Or at least most, as long as you don't mess up the cows at the beginning. It'll automatically cook all the food for you though. No longer do you need to wait for your smokers to cook it for you. With this farm, you can get cooked beef anytime you use the farm. Who wouldn't want that? And now the only disclaimer I have for these two farms is these two farms are made by using the game's max entity cramming game rule. So if by chance your world has a different setting, this might not work. But this is running the default game rules for any new world, so you should be fine, right? I mean, hopefully don't use cheats. But anyways, let's get into the first tutorial. Alright. If you want to skip right ahead to the cooker method, skip to the time I put above. Why the hell did I look above? Okay, so here are the items you're gonna need for the farm. 6 cobblestone, 1 stair. Cobblestone can be any block, by the way. It doesn't have to be cobblestone. Any stair. A fence, a hopper, a chest, 2 cows at least, a water bucket, a button, and a dispenser. So if you grab all of these, the first thing you're gonna want to do for the traditional cow grinder is to place down the chest. I always like to place them on the floor. And then place a hopper connecting to that chest. Then place down the dispenser in the back. It's right there. And then the button. You can put the water bucket inside right now. And then build walls around the hopper. Bam, 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 bam. One on top of the dispenser. But skip the one right on top of the hopper. Instead, build a temporary block here. Place the stair upside down so that you can still open the chest. And then place another block on top. Now what we have to do is bring some cows into your farm. If you're in survival, you can just place a block, grab the cow, and then lead them over here by using wheat or something. And then just toss them in. Go in, go in, go in, go in. Do it for the tutorial. Go in. So close. It might be a bit complicated at the beginning, but you can eventually do it. You need a minimum of 2 to start, but you can have as many as you want. As long as you don't reach the entity cramming limit. And then, once you're okay with the number they have inside, just place the fence on top. Now how this will work is that you will feed the cow, they will reproduce again and again. And once there are more than 24 cows in here, the next cow that breeds will die. The good thing is that the game will always suffocate the adult cow before any of the baby cows. So you will get a lot of raw beef and leather too. As you can see, we already have 5 leather and 9 raw beef. But now what if you wanted the beef to get cooked as well? And while you could just connect the hopper to a smoker with some coal, and do that, but well, the leather would clog it up, and it wouldn't be very effective either. It would also take longer. So to the cooker version. So welcome to the part of the video that explains how to make the cooker version of that cow grinder right there. And while we're here and they're bobbing up and down, I'm going to turn off the water. And there, now it will make that much noise. So in the cooker version, you will need one observer, one slab, one chest, 2 buttons, 2 dispensers, 1 fence, 1 hopper, 1 trap door, 1 water bucket, 1 lava, 12 cobblestone, and 4 glass. You can replace the glass with any block, but I'm using glass for video purposes. Let's grab all of this. There we go. And so it is built very similar to the one just before. So what you need to do is place down the chest with a hopper connected to it. But now on the left side of the hopper, build 5 blocks up. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. On the front side, place a temporary block, place the slab, and then build up with the 4 glass. Then on the right side, place 1 block, then place down your observer facing this direction. Place down the button on its face, and then go up the rest with cobblestone. Then go in the back, place a solid block behind the observer, and now to the complicated part, the back. What you have to do is place 1 block, then place down a dispenser. You're gonna need to do it on this side. Then place a temporary block, place a second dispenser, then place a cobblestone. On that temporary block, you're going to place a trap door on the top side, and then you can leave it up. You're going to need to break the cobblestone in the back. On the first dispenser, you're going to put lava, and on the second dispenser, you're going to put a water bucket. And there you have the default design. Once again, you're going to need to bring a couple cows. This is taller, so it'll be a bit more complicated to do so. But once you get them, put down 6. Place the oak fence on top again. Oh yeah, make sure to place down the button for the water. So what you'll do this time is with some wheat, you're going to breed the cows to a number that you like. And then once you have a number that you're okay with, so let's say I'm okay with this number, right? Stop the water current, and then open the trap door. It'll make all the baby cows fall. You can press this button. Lava will come out for only a second, enough to kill the cows, and they will drop leather and cooked beef steak. The only time that raw beef may fall down here is if you get the entity cramming too high, and they'll end up dying here without the lava hitting them. So the raw beef will fall down here. The down only happens sometimes, if you already hit the entity limit at the top. And that is how you make the cooker version of the cow grinder. So if you have gotten this far in the video, I want to say thank you for watching this farm tutorial. If this farm tutorial helped you, why not click that subscribe button? My goal is to reach at least 100 subs by the end of the year. That can't be that hard, right? Anyways, hope you guys enjoyed. Make sure to subscribe to stay up to date all things Minecraft and BG level up. Have a wonderful day and good night.